Welcome to Perspectives with Asima Silva. Today I have a guest, and it's kind of, people come into your lives in many different ways. This was a couple years ago, and I think I was perusing my Facebook, and I encountered this post, and it was a very, very meaningful, insightful post. And it was talking about a topic that I think a lot of us as families and with our relationships, we struggle with, and we just don't talk enough about it. So I went ahead and contacted the author of that post and said, I think I really need you on my show, to find out that she had her own podcast, and that not only is she talks about this on her own podcast, she also is an expert. So today I really am proud to invite and welcome Dr. Farjana Khan, and she will be talking to us about dysfunction and families. What I wanted to say was, we have tried to have her on the show for, I think, about a year and a half. Our schedules kept colliding, and finally, today's the day. Today's the day that we get to hear all of her wisdom on this topic. So thank you so much for joining us. And I know you're over Zoom and you're extremely busy and you have your own podcast. But could you take a minute and just introduce yourself in a little bit more detail so our viewers can get a chance to know you a little bit better?
Sure. So my name is Dr. Farjana, and again, it's such an honor and pleasure to be here. Yes, I do have my own podcast. It's called Dr. Farjana's Self-Help Diaries, and I talk about dysfunction at length. I talk about how to stop dysfunction. What is dysfunction? I talk about codependency. I'm an author. I'm a psychologist. I'm an educator, speaker, and a podcaster. So yes, I'm excited.
And any more, categories that you can apply to yourself, I don't know how you're going to be able to juggle it with already all that you're doing. So let's dive right into it. So what is it? What is dysfunction? How do you define it? How do we see it? How do we identify it?
Sure. So it's first of all, I just want to say it's extremely important to identify dysfunction. It has been normalized as a society, right? So we don't even know what dysfunction looks like. We don't know what it sounds like. It's just there's that normalcy that has taken place, which I'm going to get into in a little bit. But what is dysfunction? It's basically unhealthy behaviors and attitudes. What does it look like? It looks like put downs, criticisms, explosions, slacking behavior, spewing in misery, ruminating thoughts, excessive conversations on a topic that's just not going anywhere, being reactive, overreactive, making it about basically individuals who make it about them when it doesn't go his or her way or their way. So yeah, those are just ways dysfunction show up in our lives.
So how do I differentiate that? I can have a hard day, and maybe I'm like talking about it. Maybe I need to talk about it with multiple friends. How do I differentiate someone that's venting or someone that's just letting things out? I was watching that special that's on Netflix with Oprah Winfrey interviewing Michelle Obama. And, she talked about her table of friends where, she just lets it go and lets out all her frustrations before she either faces the camera or faces whatever she really needs to face with a more calm and collected, demeanor. How do we know between, our venting and just letting it out so that we can calm ourselves down versus dysfunction?
Absolutely. Great question. So there's a difference between venting and excessive complaining, right? So absolutely vent, absolutely process your emotions, especially to people that you trust, right? With people that you trust. But it becomes dysfunction when it's excessive. I have a rule, like I tell this to my clients all the time. Have a rule like, okay, I'm going to talk about the same topic no more than 3 times, right? Or come up with a number, no more than 2 times. When you see yourself complaining about it excessively to various people, that's when it becomes dysfunctional.
So as a side note, where does it start from? How does it begin? Like when someone does this, it's obviously they're upset. It's rooming in their head. So where is this stemming from?
Sure. So firstly, I just want to talk about So how is dysfunction normalized?
Yeah.
Like how did it even become normalized? So a lot of basically we have become a society that highlights and celebrates, unfortunately, quote unquote, dysfunctional behavior, right? Through social media, music, shows. It's about who can outdo the other with vulgarity or some type of dysfunctional behavior. Because many individuals live in unconscious states. Ego-based behavior is emphasized. Basically, it gets most of the attention. So where the dysfunction is, that's where you're getting the attention, right? Think about all the shows that we watch, all the things that are on the news, right? It's where the dysfunction is, that's where the attention goes. So, as you said, where does it come from, right? How do we get what does where does it how is where does the programming start? So there's our subconscious mind is the most influential to programming. So I want you to think of our mind, right? There's the subconscious mind, the analytical mind, and then there's the conscious mind. The goal is to activate the frontal cortex where the conscious mind exists, right? However, the average human being wakes up thinking about their problems, anticipating what will go wrong, right? Think about it. How many times have even we wake up and the first thing we do as we're brushing our teeth or whatever we're doing, we're just thinking about the problems that occurred the day before, right? Or, oh goodness, what's going to go wrong, or how much work we have, and the overwhelm we think about, right? Approximately 86% of the world's first action is to reach for their phone. Or they sleep, the phone is our access point, right? And both of those times is when our subconscious mind is the most susceptible. Here we bombard ourselves with social media. Basically, we program ourselves to dysfunction. Email, social media, etc. They remind us of the associated emotions to the known, such as people in our lives, the lack in our lives, who did what to us, what's not going right in the world. Think about it. Not only that, so we're in the subconscious mind, right? First of all, that's where the programming starts. Then we get into our places and life unfoldings, right? And many of us get stuck here right here in the analytical mind. And dysfunction becomes further normalized. We live in stress, we're problem focused, we live in a frenzy. Oh my goodness, I have to do this, I have to do this. We're in rushed mode. And this state of being becomes muscle memory, and that is reinforced over and over and over. And our environment starts conditioning our mind and body. And dysfunction just becomes normalized.
I think you described so many American citizens and families. I'm not quite sure I know anybody who doesn't live like that.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
how do we resolve it? What are the solutions? What are the remedies for? Like you said, we
So
go reach for the phone. I mean, what should we be reaching for instead of the phone?
meditation. That's what we should be reaching for. Meditating. Before we bombard ourselves, right, with life unfoldings and what's happening, meditate. Meditating means know thyself, knowing yourself, right? You're training your brain how to be. You're training your body how to be, right? So, do you want me to just get into the solutions, or do you want me to kind of talk about what are the some of the long term effects if we continue to live in this state? As you said, many of us live like this.
Yes.
You don't know it, right?
So please
So what
go
do you
ahead,
think?
long-term solutions, and then
Yes.
I'm
Yeah,
going to
yeah.
ask you some
So
more questions after that.
absolutely. So, what are the long term effects, right? Dysfunction spreads like wildfire. And I say this all the time: dysfunction breeds dysfunction. Remember two facts: our brain is a record of the past, right? Our thoughts, and then also the second fact: our thoughts create our destiny. With dysfunction around, our programming gets activated, right? Remember, we talked about the subconscious mind and the programming.
Yep.
We think of the family problem or the dysfunction. We have certain feelings then associated with the problem. We internalize it, and then we get addicted to certain negative emotions. Hence, we start basically replaying and acting out those emotions in our own lives. Basically, our body's muscle memory activates our insecurities and those old emotional patterns. That's one of the long term effects individually one can have, right? Second, it can lower our immunity. If we constantly live in this state of dysfunction, in this rush mode, in this mode of like reacting to society and to whatever is happening in the world, it lowers our immunity. Next, it teaches the next generation negative patterns of dealing with problems. Remember, I said programs are etched in our memory. particularly think about the analytical mind doesn't even develop until age 7 and onward. So prior to that, many of us have already been programmed by the way we watched our caregivers deal with life, emotions, what kind of mentality they had. And then the dysfunctional behavior continues, if we're not aware, to pass down from generation to generation. And one last thing about this is it leads to trauma bonding relationships. And this is extremely important. Sometimes we wonder, like, wait, why do I have this dysfunctional relationship with my coworker or my spouse? Or what is going on? Why? Or my mother, right? What is trauma bonding? Trauma bonds are emotional bonds with an individual or a group of people that arise from recurring cyclical patterns of dysfunction, basically, right? So basically, there's a need to stand up for yourself when, there is dysfunction, but then it's seen as an attack, right? And then you're punished. And then there's intermittent reinforcement. And then this creates that need to continually seek that dysfunctional individual's attention and approval. So it becomes this like cyclical pattern, and you seek that dysfunction. That dysfunction leads to those trauma bonding relationships in your life. And that's a lot of people need to really reflect on that. Like, wow, how many trauma bonding relationships do I actually have in my life? Right?
Yeah. So I have a question in the sense of
Sure.
um, it all sounds right, but can you give us like concrete examples where I can say, okay, I understand now like what that really means in reality. Like I understand philosophically as you're talking about that we're going to be attracted to these trauma bonding relationships because that's what we've been kind of programmed to. But
Sure.
what's a good example of that? Can you give me like a typical example that we may not be aware of, but that would fall under this category?
Absolutely. So I'll give you an example. So let's say you're in this dynamic, right? So this person engages in the silent treatment, criticizes you. There's competitiveness in the relationship, manipulation, right? So an example. Okay, you go up to let's use a parent. Okay, let's use a parent. So let's say this is your father. Okay, all right. So hey, Dad, I really didn't like what you did there. It really hurt my feelings. What are you talking about? What do you mean I hurt your feelings? That didn't happen. So he starts gaslighting, right? He starts deflecting. No, you made me feel like this, right? You made me feel like this. So then the parent gets upset at you, right? And it gives you the silent treatment. Okay. So you're like confused, you're perplexed, like, wait, what just happened? I just expressed my feelings, but now my parent isn't talking to me, right? So you're given the cold shoulder because you spoke up, right? And then there's that discrepancy because now here and there, this parent will send you, a present or compliment you, but it's just that hot and cold dynamic. So you constantly seek reassurance and attention from this person, right? Because there's that trauma bonding there, right? Because this person never validated you and you're seeking that an unmet need. Whenever you're seeking that unmet need with this person or an unmet need from your childhood, and you're seeking it from this person or a particular relationship, and that keeps being replayed and reinforced by this dynamic of intermittent punishment and reward.
So in that same scenario, can you give us what would have been a proper response? As you're speaking, and I'm thinking devil's advocate here. As you're
Yes.
speaking, I'm thinking, what about those teenagers that just, want to talk back? And yes, they may want to talk about their feelings, but sometimes they're just spewing anger that has nothing to do with the parent. So, double-sided question. One is how do you, segregate those two? And two, what would have been a better answer for that particular parent?
Sure. So let's start out with a better answer for the parent. Validating the person's feeling. Like, oh my god, oh, I'm so sorry I made you feel that way. Tell me more. How are you feeling? Oh, okay. So I didn't make you feel unseen, right? I didn't make you feel I didn't make you feel seen. I'm so sorry I did that. That wasn't my intention. I love you very much. How can I make it better next time? Right? So
Right.
just validating the person's feeling, right? Thinking about solutions with the person instead of deflecting, right? Using those or gaslighting, right? Those are dysfunctional patterns of being. Now, as far as a teenager, right? You asked me, so if a teenager has that basically the parent or the guardian has to understand where that child or the youth is developmentally, right?
Right.
So I always say this to parents all the time or guardians. they don't develop their prefrontal cortex until approximately the age of 25, right? So if you know this about children and about teenagers, you understand that they don't have those higher, really like those higher order reflective skills yet. They're still developing, right? The critical thinking, better decision making. You have to be the person that helps them through that process. So that when you see them going through that anger, keep telling yourself, wait a second, this is not about me. This is not personal. This is not personal. Validate your feeling. I know you're feeling angry right now. Do you want to talk about it now, or do you want to talk about it later? But I'm not going to be okay with you disrespecting me right now.
Right.
So we can stop now and then engage in this conversation after you're feeling a little better. Right? Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
But not personalizing and not attacking them and because you know where they are developmentally. So definitely a lot of awareness has to be. Parents don't know. Many parents just don't know, right? That this is where they are developmentally.
So we talked about like when you described all this, stress and frustration and trauma bonding, which I think a lot of us in this country live. And what do you foresee for the generations that are coming up? Because if they're seeing currently the people that are raising them, parents or guardians living in this manner, what are the kind of futuristic, characteristics of the next generations that we're probably going to be seeing?
So I'm sorry, you got cut off a little bit. So
Yep.
are you saying what are some solutions for them?
Not
Some
only just
strategies?
solutions, but what are we looking forward to in the next generation? If we have this kind of trauma bonding, issues that we're still, maybe some of us are unaware and haven't fixed it, what are we looking forward to in terms of the characteristics of the next generations that we're going to be seeing, our children and our children's children? And then maybe talking about some solutions that you may have that we could start implementing to avoid that.
Sure. So if this continues, right, more dysfunction, right? Lack of there's going to be a disconnection to you're going to be disconnected to yourself. If you continue in this trauma bonding relationships, right? And you are reactive to what people are saying and what people are doing, and you're seeking validation from the wrong people because there's this trauma bonding. The dysfunction is going to just simply continue. That's it. It's going to continue. You're going to make poor choices. You won't be present. You can just imagine the array of situations that may occur.
Right.
This is why I'm talking about this topic because, hey, let's stop normalizing dysfunction as a society. Let's teach our kids what dysfunction looks like. Let's talk about what trauma bonding is. Do we even know it? Like, how many of us know what trauma bonding is? Right? Let's talk about that at schools, in colleges, right? And in parent workshops.
Right. So what are your solutions for this?
Sure. So I kind of I wanted to talk about it in categories. So some solutions for yourself. You can ask yourself these questions, and please take out notes. And whoever's listening, write down notes because this will help you. So you can ask yourself, how am I contributing to the dysfunctional behavior? Am I being vocal enough? Am I engaging in follow-up behavior? Am I getting stuck in a narrative? Right, like a couple's narrative, a family narrative, extended family narrative. Sometimes we pigeonhole ourselves into some narrative, like some negative narrative. And I can elaborate on that later if you want. Another technique that you can use is notice yourself getting into your old programming and say, hello, old programming. The more you watch your thoughts, the more it dissipates. Engage in self-care. Positivity and healing helps weed out dysfunction in your life, right? Because there's no room for it. Unconscious individuals will either rise up to your level of consciousness or naturally separate from your life, right? Because there's no space for it. Right. Engage in self-preservation behavior like, I don't want it. I'm not adding unnecessary tension into my life. As I mentioned, meditate. I cannot emphasize that enough. Don't simmer in problems. Don't overthink situations. Learn ways to not ruminate over problems. Remember, the same thoughts lead to the same choices. So practice a new way of being. Think, I don't do dysfunction. Break addictions to certain emotions, right? Notice your habitual states when you're around certain people and learn to self-regulate. Stop replaying your past over and over and start replaying your greatness. Focus on your greatness. As far as couples go, Call out dysfunction. Label it. You can say, for instance, stop criticizing me. Stop gaslighting. Stop putting me down. Label it. When you label it, it becomes concrete. Get out, like I mentioned, get out of any narrative that you've pigeonholed your relationship into, right? So it could be like, I'll give you an example. Like, okay, I have the narrative of, let's say I have the narrative of like my spouse doesn't prioritize me, right? Or you can have the narrative of, my spouse is too busy, right? So sometimes we like kind of, this is our couple's dynamic and we just make it concrete and we box it in and there's no room for growth, right? You stop the dysfunction, vocalize what you want, communicate clearly, right? So it's not like about how the other person is being dysfunctional, reflect on how you're also being adding to that dynamic. As far as children goes and children and youth, as you mentioned before, right? And move away from dysfunction. Teach them what dysfunction looks like. I always say this when as an educator, I also say, hey guys, you're not a plant. You have legs. You can get up and move away when you see dysfunction, right?
Right.
You don't have to engage in negative conversations. Teach them to be leaders, not followers, right? They can disengage from a negative conversation. They actually have that option. Sometimes we think we have to sit there and talk about all the negative things with our friends. We don't have to. You can say, oh, please excuse me. I'm going to go and do something else, or I have to go somewhere, right? Normalize that, like getting up and moving away from dysfunctional conversation. You don't have to succumb to society's normalization of dysfunction. That's it. And teach youth and just yourself, have a mindset of, I'm not going to be a victim to any circumstance, right? And this particularly applies to loved ones you're responsible for. Teach them how to be productive and functional, not dysfunctional, right? What else? And then also, like I just today, I actually was presenting in front of a group of kids on career day, and I was with a group of like leaders in the community, and they're like, oh, it's just the way it is. Children just don't listen anymore. It's just the way it is. No, why is it just the way it is? Don't normalize it. Simple. It's that simple. You don't have to like succumb to this submissive nature of like, oh, it's just the way it is. No, it's the way it is because everyone's okay with it. You don't have to be okay with it. You can teach your children how to make good decisions, how to not normalize dysfunction, right? And as far as the family goes, this is a big one, right? Dysfunction can really, really increase in family dynamics if you're not aware. So don't sweep problems under the rug. Don't prolong getting help. If you prolong it, that's dysfunctional. Get the help. Call out dysfunctional behavior, correct it, vocalize needs, ask for help, right? Like think about it. How many things can we avoid just by asking for help and not build resentment, right? Think about it, being a wife in the family dynamic, or being the husband, or whoever you are in that family dynamic. And then don't be in doom and gloom states. Again, go back to your programming. What did you see your parents do? How did they react to life struggles or challenges? Don't get into that state. Bring good energy into your home. Have a rule of be love, not hate. Clarity is key. Like, what is the energy in your home, right? And just really looking at that. How do you break out of that goals? How do you tackle it, right? What kind of mindset? Are you a victim to what happens? To those circumstances, or are you like, no, I got this, we got this as a family, and have that mindset of like, everything works out for me and my family, and go with that mindset.
I think you touched on a very important topic, and that's and to normalize this kind of thinking, it needs to be taught on a broad level. Otherwise, I can teach my child to walk away from toxic conversations between friends. But if it's not normalized, then that, I'm telling my child to be brave, to become an outcast, or to, be okay with being alone. And that's itself is very difficult for a lot of children, especially when they hit their teenage years, and Absolutely. It's the time of where they want to be accepted and included. So I think the challenge that I'm hearing from what you're saying is to normalize, we need to educate this on a broad level. At all different levels, at kids, families, coworkers, at all different levels. Now, I will ask you, we only have a couple minutes left, but this is a pretty intense question. whenever we talk about toxicity and removing yourself from, toxic relationships and trauma bonding relationships, a lot of people, and I'm not of the mentality, I understand that they're great parents and some parents need a lot of help. But a lot of parents will view this kind of, sayings of, oh, here we go again. They're going to blame the parents. Here we go, where we're trying to tell the child to kind of walk away or separate themselves from the parent. A parent can't be a parent anymore. They can't give their, advice and opinion because now, as if I don't agree with my child, then I'm not, I'm not giving them, I'm not hearing them. I'm not listening to them, and it's become very hard for parents to parent, is what I've also heard on the other side. What would you say to that? And I apologize, we only have about a minute and a half left.
Sure. So can you simplify that question a little bit so I
So
can
the
understand it?
question I have is, we can talk about trauma bonding, and sometimes this trauma bonding, as you indicated, could be with parents. And a lot of parents view
Absolutely.
this
Yes.
kind of philosophy and say, the world is going into an era where a child, if I don't agree with my child's choice on everything, that I'm not being supportive, that I'm not being a good parent. I cannot be a parent anymore. And they have this feeling where the philosophies are going in a direction where we're teaching our children to be anti-parent, to be against parents no matter what. And what would you say in terms of the work that you do and how you would address this kind of concern?
Okay. So simply, because we have a few minutes, I would say connect with your child. Spend time with your child, right? This is how you can influence them. This is how they will listen to you. Go to the movies regularly with them. Go on dinner dates with them regularly and engage in family therapy. Normalize therapy, right? Go engage in family therapy. Talk about things, right? Make it fun. So, and then have things that you look forward to with your family, meaning with that teenager or that adult, child. Meaning, plan trips, plan great events with them, so it becomes adventurous and they have something to look forward to. This is how you connect with your child, and that all that extra stuff that we're talking about, the parenting, what I should say, what I shouldn't say, it just becomes natural because they're more willing to listen to you.
Sounds good. Thank you so much, Farjana. And I thank all our viewers for joining us again today. Again, as you know, great discussion. We could talk about this topic for a lot longer and probably have tons and tons of questions. So we'll try to have her again on the show as long as our schedules meet up again. And it took us a year and a half to get our schedules to actually align. So hopefully it won't take another year and a half, but we'll see. So thank you again. And what we learned today, talk, communicate, normalize your feelings and talk about your feelings and work it out before we actually go into this trauma bonding relationships with whoever we are interacting with. I thank you again for watching, and I hope you join us again with Perspectives with Asima Silva.